everyone, my name is Evan and I like to make stop-motion dinosaurs and monsters, and in this YouTube video today, a Hollow Earth monster is now on his way, so it's time to make Titanus Doug, I do say. During part 1 of the Monsterverse Doug project today, I'll be making the skeleton, you could say. And while I craft away at Titanus Doug skeleton today, we'll be doing a deep dive, I say, on this Hollow Earth monster, you could say. Godzilla vs. Kong released in March 2021 and became a box office streaming hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hard to believe that was almost 3 years ago now. The film delivered its promise on a crazy, bombastic action-adventure, following Kong as he tries to take down Godzilla, with some truly epic movie monster fighting matches taking place on an aircraft carrier in the Tasman Sea at the end of the first act, as well as the futuristic neon glow in Hong Kong in its finale. However, the set piece people often like to mention when talking about what they liked about the film is the Hollow Earth. This sequence takes place in, well, a very obvious place, the center of the Earth, in a previously unexplored region, theorized and hinted at in Kong Skull Island and Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Here the mountains tower over the monsters, making them look small in comparison. The land curves over them and the rocks float around them, due to the gravity having a tendency to change and shift around here, depending on the altitude. We even uncover more information about Kong's ancestors, as we see their great cathedral, a place built by Kongs and their ancient human allies. So one would normally think that these would be the most memorable parts of the Hollow Earth that people remember the most, but nope. It's all about Titanus Doug! Team Doug! Titanus Doug is just one of many monsters you will find in the Hollow Earth, appearing for a measly 4 seconds in Godzilla vs. Kong. However, I think he gets a total screen time of 14 seconds in Godzilla x Kong, but yet has made an immense impact on the community and has immediately become a fan favorite. I mean, it comes as no surprise, how can you say no to that adorable little face? So it's time for a breakdown on this fan favorite kaiju known as Doug. Titanus Doug was found in, well, the present year, 2024. And note, that's not a mistake because Godzilla vs. Kong takes place in 2024, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled for a Doug near you. Anyways, Apex and Monarch agents alongside Kong set on an expedition into the Hollow Earth, where they are hoping to find a practically unlimited power source, capable of powering Mechagodzilla. On their mission, they utilize Heaves, otherwise known as a Hollow Earth aerial vehicle, which are capable of handling the immense pressure from the Earth's core. While they were flying around in these vehicles, they were able to survey the Hollow Earth's surface, where they came across a Titan feeding upon smaller rock critters, unbothered by Kong or the high-tech machinery flying up above. While Doug is dwarfed by Kong and Kong stands in at 335 feet tall in this movie, King Doug stands in at approximately 60 feet tall with a length of 240 feet and weighs approximately 20,000 tons. Honestly, a lot bigger than most people were kind of expecting. I mean, it comes as no real surprise, I suppose. King Doug is one hefty boy. And it should be mentioned that the sheer scale of the Hollow Earth even makes the largest of monsters look small. Titanus Doug is a quadrupedal reptile, meaning he walks on all fours. He has brown scaly skin with a decent amount of spikes and osteoderms, which probably serves as a fairly decent defense against certain predators such as hellhawks, which are large featherless owl bat-like creatures that inhabit the caves of the Hollow Earth. Definitely a very unique creature, but honestly kinda creepy looking. Anyway, with Doug having brown counter-shaded skin, he's able to blend into the environment quite well. So he's easily able to ambush creatures when they're at their most vulnerable state, making hunting easy for this apex predator. Doug's skull structure is stubby with jaws filled with razor-sharp teeth. With prey like the rock critters that have tough exoskeletons, Doug has developed an extremely strong bite force, capable of breaking the shell and bone with ease. Doug's eyes are also facing forward. This means he has binocular vision and extremely good eyesight. And despite their cute appearance, it is a formidable predator. Doug also has a long tail sporting some thegomizers, similar to what you would find on a Stegosaurus or evolved Godzilla, that can be used to ward off other titans or other smaller creatures that irritate it. And there are some people theorizing out there that this could be a subspecies of Titanus Godzilla, which is honestly not very far-fetched, considering all the features that these two share in common, such as binocular vision, crocodile-like skin, dorsal plates, and considering we now have a new evolved form of Godzilla, it also shares Stegomizer traits as well. Although, as far as I know, nothing concrete has been officially confirmed, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that this is the case. As far as intelligence goes, Doug functions purely off instinct. Like most large reptiles, hunting, sleeping, mating, and eating being its primary functions. Honestly, just look at his face. There's not a single thought going on behind those eyes. Observing monitor lizards, you can witness many of the same mannerisms and hunting styles, so it's safe to say its IQ matches that of many of the reptiles that already exist in the animal kingdom. He doesn't play with his food like a cat or find a way to remove the shell off the rock critters. He just swallows them whole, making Doug not very smart, but that's probably one of the most terrifying things of all. Although Komodo dragons, whilst being solitary for most of their lives, have been observed to team up with other members of their species to take down larger prey, such as water buffalo. So this potentially hints at the idea that Titanus Doug teamed up with other photodons to take down even larger titans. So who knows, maybe even thousands or millions of years ago, dozens of these monsters would have been able to take down a Titanus Godzilla. As far as creation of this monster goes, it was brought to life by Matt Alsop and Jared Krzyzewski, the same concept artist that came up with the design for Mechagodzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong. Some clear inspiration was taken from the Komodo dragon, which is a large monitor lizard that inhabits Indonesia, but also another potential inspiration is the Simosuchus, which bears a very similar resemblance to Doug, which is an ancient alligatoroid creature from the late Cretaceous period. It has a scaly appearance with a stubby skull, and it happens to walk on all four legs. Its original concepts show a slightly different creature, one example being a much smaller and leaner, more terrifying looking creature with larger, more pointed spikes as well as two prongs protruding from its tail. Something that can move at a far more agile pace to catch its prey. With another piece of concept art, it takes on a much more armored appearance, closely resembling Anguirus, the well-loved classic monster. Which means in another universe, we could potentially see Monsterverse Godzilla team up with Titanus Doug to maybe take down Gigan someday, I do say. In the concept art for Godzilla vs. Kong, it seems like a Monarch or Apex military team was meant to encounter a Titanus Doug and engage in combat, in a action-packed scene that would have fit right alongside the Warbat sequence. But this was most likely cut for time in order to streamline the movie. While this would have been an awesome scene to see, I'm happy we can look at Doug as more of a chubby, loving titan, as opposed to just a terrifying murder machine. Much of Matt's concept for the Hollow Earth showcases a much more volcanic and misty and more terrifying environment, which means Doug could have been originally a cave dweller, living in the dark tunnels beneath the surface, instead of the forest-dwelling monster that we see in the final film. Now I should also briefly mention I do plan on making a Hollow Earth set at some point, so if you don't want to miss that, be sure to subscribe and smash that notification bell so you don't miss that video, which will be coming in the near future. I'm not sure when, but soon. So, a lot of you who aren't necessarily maybe familiar with the Monsterverse franchise are probably wondering why so many people love this sweet baby boy. Especially when you consider the fact that in his first debut in Godzilla vs. Kong, he was on there for only a measly 4 seconds. Well, it's honestly kind of hard to say why, but personally I think it's because he kind of resembles, well, a lot of household family pets, such as dogs. He personally reminds me of my pug a lot. And with Doug's beady puppy dog eyes, it's probably safe to say it reminded a lot of viewers of their household family pets. I know it definitely did for me. Which could have possibly helped form a connection with the creature that has such a small part in the film. That or they just love seeing new monsters, which I think is also a large part of the concept. And with this creature bearing such a resemblance to Godzilla, people would undeniably become interested. And there are countless videos here on YouTube discussing whether or not Titanus Doug is actually truly related to Godzilla or not, therefore adding more to the household name. Now, about that name. The name Titanus Doug was originally a running joke throughout the Godzilla community, before eventually being adopted by the director. which most definitely helped make it a fan favorite. A very similar thing happened to Behemoth, a mammoth-like titan from Godzilla King of the Monsters. And it doesn't have a very big presence in the film either. But in spite of that, it still has become a fan favorite. So that concludes all the info on Titanus Doug for part 1. So, do you love him for what little presence he has in, well, both films at this point? Or do you just not quite get it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you also enjoyed this video today, be sure to smash that like button as hard as a kaiju, as I like to say, because Titanus Doug will definitely appreciate that, I do say. Your Royal Highness Doug would also appreciate it today if you shared this video so you could bring more awareness to, well, Doug. Because he is, well, popular, but probably not as well known as some of the other monsters from the Monsterverse. And if you just so happen to be new here and made it this far in the video and enjoy this type of content, be sure to subscribe so that way you don't miss a video and have your post notifications turned on. Because unfortunately, statistically speaking, approximately only 10% of you are subscribed and or watching. So your support makes the big difference for this small channel. So be sure to smash all those buttons today so you don't miss a video, I do say. I post daily shorts, usually 1 video per week, and occasional live stream on, well, whatever projects I'm working on. Now it's time for the build rundown on the skeleton for Titanus Doug. So we started things off with a bit of tinfoil and aluminum armature wire. The tinfoil basically serves as a filler to help keep weight down and save on clay. And the armature wire is used for both, well, the skeleton as well as the joints for what parts you want to move. As for the sections that we didn't want to move, we used oven-baked clay, specifically Sculpey, not sponsored, which basically consists of, well, most of this skeleton actually. Basically all the bones, the spikes, skulls, stegomizers, and claws. His teeth are also made of that product as well, but I must admit I accidentally burnt those, so we used a little bit of paint off camera to basically kind of cover up my mistake. Then I also used just a little bit of plasticine clay in some of the joints, you could say, to basically help him stand up today. However, be sure to stay tuned for part 2 because there's definitely a lot more work to be done on this Titanus Doug fun. So one could say there are far more details coming this skeleton's way. Where in part 2, for all of you, I'll be doing a lot of painting, you could say, as well as adding the first layer of clay. I should probably say plasticine clay, which is the one that I use for basically all the details and muscles, you could say. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video today on a Royal Highness Titanus Doug, I do say. Hello everyone, my name is Evan and I like to make stop-motion dinosaurs and monsters, and in this YouTube video today we'll be adding clay to Titanus Doug, I say. And as I sculpt away at this movie monster today, we'll be learning more about Godzilla's evolution while I craft away at this Hollow Earth monster today, I do say. On part 2 of the Titanus Doug project today, we'll start off with some painting, I say, and once that's done, it's on to some plasticine sculpting fun. Where one might say we're making a cute chubby movie monster today, I do say. And as I make this Hollow Earth monster today, we'll be learning more about Godzilla's evolution today. In the Monsterverse, we've been introduced to a few different Godzilla incarnations, including a few relatives as well as evolutionary offshoots. So let's begin with number 1, the Titanus. The CG artists originally referred them as scaly quadrupeds, and were designed to resemble Godzilla in some shape or form. How? Well, it was a suggestion by Adam Wingard that these creatures should have scaly properties and similar facial features to the Godzilla species. These artists went as far as giving this guy a spiky back. These small spikes resemble Godzilla's dorsal plates and could have been used as a warning display for other species, or in some special occasions, monarch aircraft that get too close. In the official art book, we read that basically, and I quote, "These are offshoots of the evolutionary branch that gave birth to the Godzilla species." That's right, everyone. By definition, these guys could have been distant cousins or perhaps ancestors of the Gojira species we know and love today. So, how big were these? I gave a rough estimate in part 1, but we'll give a little bit more of a breakdown in part 2 here. By comparing the rock creature to humans, and comparing the height proportions to this particular monster, and to Kong, it's possible that these creatures could have grown up to 90 or 100 feet in height. Although initially Titanus Doug doesn't look that big, one can expect that these giant lizards would definitely be one of the top predators in their domain. And since they share some similar features to larger lizards we know today, we can assume these were adept swimmers, capable of swimming at fast speeds similar to the next kaiju we're going to talk about, Godzilla. We're gonna go over to two of the members of the Godzillas that we know of, the G-Man as well as probably some lesser known character, known as Dagon, or sometimes referred to as 5146 Adam. That's not very appealing. Anyways, many people believe that Dagon was Godzilla's ancestor. However, he wouldn't actually be Godzilla's ancestor if he was around while Godzilla was still alive. Now, let me explain. We know the G-Man has been around for millions of years. But since the recording of Dagon in Phoenician records, it's clear that both of these monsters were around at the same time. Phoenician civilization dates back as far as 1500 BC, which is only a mere 3,500 years ago, meaning there could have been many Godzilla species roaming around at some point. I'll get to what happens to them later. From the descriptions I have seen on these Phoenician tablets, Dagon was probably not as big as the Godzilla we know today, mainly because his dorsal plates look very similar to the back on Godzilla 2014. Dagon's posture is a bit more hunched over and he's greener in appearance. Definitely not as built as the 2019 Godzilla or the 2024 one. This suggests that it was a much younger Godzilla specimen. It's more than likely that the younger Godzilla specimens had a tougher time growing up than the more mature Godzillas. Remember, these had some dangerous opponents going around, especially the Mutos. A pair of these could have easily brought down a younger Godzilla, but a pair is not as dangerous as a Muto Prime, equipped with all sorts of weapons to bring down a Godzilla, which is what exactly happened to Dagon. So it's safe to assume that the rest of the Godzilla species that were alive many millennia ago were wiped out by the Mutos. Except one, the Godzilla we know today. Well, maybe not exactly at this point. Just know during this video I'm referring to the 2014 and 2019 Godzilla. That being said, let's rewind back to the 1900s, where the G-Man woke up to a, well, very much different environment than what he was used to millions of years ago. The Atomic Age was born. Between 2014 and 2019, the constant levels of radiation led up to a much more rapid evolutionary development. For the G-Man's body, the same would have happened to Dagon, but as mentioned previously, he died before the radiation levels on the surface could get close to the levels in the Hollow Earth. Now, let's talk dorsals. While it is true that the battle with the Mortal Prime had something to do with the dorsals changing shape, this is not the complete explanation. These dorsals would have changed shape either way once the Godzilla reaches a certain point of maturity. How do we know this now? Well, let's look back at the scene in Godzilla vs. Kong when he first gets his axe. This axe strongly resembles the G-Man's dorsals. But we know that this plate did not come from Godzilla, it did come from a already mature Godzilla. This axe blade is pretty big, similar in size to what Godzilla has on his back. This means Godzillas in the Hollow Earth were capable of growing this size due to the energy in the Hollow Earth, which was just as strong if not stronger than the levels on the surface. Godzilla 2019 is approximately the second largest Godzilla now in the Monsterverse, measuring in at 393 feet in height with a weight of 99,000 tons. Now, a rhetorical question, can he grow even larger? Yes he can. So, let's talk about the next and possibly largest Gojira specimen, Mega Gojira. There is a scene in Godzilla vs. Kong where Kong is seen pulling a skull out of the ground. Although this doesn't look too much like a Godzilla skull, it's likely a relative to Godzilla, similar to the Pterodonts except much bigger. In the official novelization, Eileen Andrews observed these skeletons from the heaves. These, in her mind, were very similar to the Godzilla species. She also mentions that these were very similar to the finds found in the Philippines, referring to Dagon's skeleton. So, what is this thing? This is just a theory, a film theory, but it's likely, like the Pterodonts, that this is an offshoot evolutionary tree that gave birth to the perfected Godzilla. You can tell it's a relative by the protruding canines that are discreetly present in all of Godzilla's relatives, including the Pterodonts. And yes, they are present in Godzilla as well, especially the new evil version, but we'll probably talk about him a little bit more in part 3. To find out how big this animal was, we need to know, or make an educated guess on the corporal shape of this creature. Given the fact that this monster would have been simply massive, it would probably also walk on all fours, so it would be a quadruped similar to Titanus Doug, but spend the other half of their time walking on their hind legs. Almost like a hybrid of both Titanus Doug and Godzilla. This animal would be slow, but powerful, with similar features both found in Godzilla and the Pterodonts. So, did it have atomic breath capabilities? Probably not. An animal this large with atomic breath capabilities would destroy this place in seconds. But it didn't, probably because it couldn't. Whereas a smaller Godzilla was able to blast completely through it while standing on the Earth's crust. Even without this ability, the proportions of this animal's skull only means this could have been one of the largest titans we have ever seen. If the G-Man ever grows this large, he would probably lose the capability to move and fight as well as he does now. That being said, the Godzilla species is a product of a refined evolutionary process, producing a kaiju with the right size, weight, and capabilities to make this the most powerful titan in the Monsterverse, aka long live the king. In review, we learned the Pteranodons, Godzilla, and this large unnamed species, otherwise dubbed as Mechagodzilla, are all in the same family tree. We also have learned that the Godzilla species evolves over time depending on their environment, and could grow to larger proportions. Or we already kinda know that actually. Thanks to GXK, I do say. More on that Godzilla in part 3, I do say. And finally, because there are different offshoots of this genus, it's more than likely there are plenty other Godzilla relatives to help fill in those evolutionary gaps. Do you think we'll ever see any of these other Godzilla species in a potential monster film? Now, it should be mentioned we already do know what Godzilla evolves into in the future, so we're talking about some perhaps lesser known monsters. So let me know in the comments below. I kind of want to see what ideas you guys could come up with to fill in these evolutionary gaps, so if you come up with an original monster, it might be kind of cool to discuss that. And, well, if you have a request for another movie monster you would like to see me make in the future, be sure to comment that as well. Now, if you're one of those people that think my channel is very underrated, you can support it today easily by smashing that like button as hard as Doug if he sat on one of those rock creatures. It's a couple seconds out of your life to just let me know that you appreciate all the hard work and effort that goes into making this content and these movie monsters. And if you're new here and, well, made it this far and enjoy this type of content, be sure to subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of my new videos. Considering 90% of you aren't subscribed, that would make a big difference for this little channel. I would definitely appreciate it, and just for everyone who is currently subscribed, I just want you to know that I appreciate your support vastly. Anyway, it's time for the build rundown. So the materials used during part 2 today, a lot of brown paint I say, because we had to paint all those spikes today, which honestly wasn't that bad in retrospect. It was a little bit of work, but it definitely is nowhere near as painful as Godzilla. That being said, we still have a lot of osteoderms to make for part 3. There was some oven-baked clay used for those tail spikes, one could say. But the biggest amount of clay used today was plasticine clay to make our King Chubby Dougie, I do say. Well, that sounds kind of wrong. Maybe I should delete that. Nah, I'm gonna leave it. Apart from my odd innuendo today, I hope to see you all in part 3, I do say. Where one could say we'll be finishing off King Doug, I say, where we'll be adding in the final layers of clay and all those fine details along the way. So be sure to have your post notifications turned on today so you don't miss any of the daily short updates, I do say, because part 3 will soon be on the way. Oh yes, who's a cute little chubby Dougie? Until next time, folks. Hello everyone, my name is Evan and I like to make stop-motion dinosaurs and monsters, and I'm proud to say in part 3 today we'll be finishing off Titanus Doug, I do say. On part 3 of the Chubby King Dougie project today, we'll be finishing off this Hollow Earth monster, I say, and as I sculpt away at this Kaiju's details today, we'll be talking about the newest evolution of Godzilla, you could say, the one from GXK, I do say. When Godzilla's new design was revealed to the world, some people were excited. Others, well, not so much.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Regardless if you hate it or love the new look, we all were wondering why Godzilla's appearance had changed. And for better or worse, it was the most talked about topic amongst Godzilla fans leading up to the GXK release. Now, about a month after the movie has been out, I was able to get my hands on the novelization of it, and I had the pleasure of going through it while working on this project. Now, obviously, some of the new lore that the book went over was, well, the reason Godzilla's appearance had changed so much, and gives you the reason as to why it was so drastic, and also explains the reason he came out of the ice looking more aquatic and fish-like. So that's what I'm going to explain today, so hopefully you enjoy this video. I do say, welcome to Moose Motion Animation. So, let's get to it. First, we'll go over a quick recap on his old design. Before his evolution, Godzilla's design in the Monsterverse has stayed fairly consistent throughout the past 4 movies, and across the expanding media. While some aspects of him would change in his design between appearances, such as his dorsal plates, his physique, and the shape of his feet. Overall, his look stayed pretty much the same. It was always just minor and subtle changes where if you weren't paying quite close enough attention, you probably wouldn't even notice them. When you have such a great base design like the Monsterverse Godzilla, it's hard to change his look simply for the sake of change, which even Adam Wingard himself agrees with. Here's a brief summary on what he had to say on an article I found on therap.com. Word. Now, in this article, Adam says that it was important to him that Godzilla retain his look from Godzilla King of the Monsters when we got to Godzilla vs. Kong. And he went on to give a very good example in my opinion, by comparing the OG King Kong stop-motion design to the Suitmation one. And by that, he means the 1962 version of King Kong in King Kong vs. Godzilla. And yeah, not gonna lie, the Suitmation version of King Kong here looks really derpy. At any rate, Adam said it felt jarring as a fan. And as a fan, he always loved the different iterations of Godzilla over the years. And it seems like he's been quite enthusiastic about making his own design for a while now. Although he wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the design change was not just for the heck of it. Toy sales. Anyway, aside from my 2 cents, or technically his, he wanted to make sure that the evolution of Godzilla was a propulsive point to the story. So when Adam had the chance of being the first and only returning director for the Monsterverse franchise, he finally had the proper chance to have a Godzilla evolution. Adam also says that they didn't do anything too out of left field so people wouldn't balk at it. Ultimately, the changes to Godzilla are relatively subtle. There's some proportional changes and extra spikes, and obviously there's pink, which is probably the biggest one. Now, for the most part, I do personally agree with this, although I would have probably liked to see the red from the original toys. And he may look just a little bit different, but you can ultimately still tell that this is Monsterverse Godzilla. He's still got the big guy's heart and soul at the end of the day. Now, the designer of Evolved Godzilla, Jared Kuchevsky, threw in his own statement regarding the G-Man's new look when coming up with the design. His explanation is Godzilla's body was absorbing so much energy that essentially all this stored up energy was eating away at the fat reserves in his body, resulting in a more athletic appearing Godzilla. However, the book is out, everyone, so we do have some official lore as to why the design of Godzilla has changed. And just like Adam said, there is a solid explanation behind it. So remember, this is the official novelization of the film, so it is official lore of the Godzilla franchise right now, up until Legendary decides to, well, contradict it with a different project. R.I.P. Mewtwo Prime. So in the new Empire movie, you see Godzilla and Tiamat's battle. Spoiler alert, everyone. Which it really wasn't much of a battle, as it was more or less a breaking and entering turned to murder by the hands of the big man. It was all over in an instant. However, in the book, you actually get to see what happens in the scene where Godzilla's evolving. Tiamat's lair was smack dab in the middle of the highest natural source of radiation on Earth. Radiation in the Monsterverse is like gold and treasure to dragons of fantasy and medieval times. It's essentially irresistible to them. It gives them more power, capabilities, and pride. And well, Godzilla wanted it all. Once Godzilla killed Tiamat, he claimed her lair and radiation sources for his own, and started his transformation. The book explains during this process, Tiamat's blood and her essence had drifted down and around Godzilla. His body then began to absorb what was ultimately her DNA. A very similar process to what we saw in Godzilla King of the Monsters when Mothra sacrifices herself, therefore allowing the G-Man to actually absorb her powers, making him capable of defeating King Ghidorah. Tiamat's unwilling sacrifice resulted in a similar effect. Tiamat's DNA combined with extreme influxes of radiation basically made the G-Man a hybrid of the two Titans. And this explains why his body went through such drastic changes. You can see the aspects of Tiamat's design that carried over to Godzilla. For example, the pufferfish-like spikes and prods that have grown out of his body, giving him a almost poison to the touch appearance. His dorsal plates now also appear to be more fleshy and fin-like. His overall body shape has become more slender and serpentine, allowing for better flexibility and speed, which definitely came in handy when he was battling Scar King and Shimo in the Hollow Earth. So only one question remains. Will Godzilla retain this look into the next movie? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Godzilla evolution video / Titanus King Dougie, which also happens to be a long-distant cousin in theory to Godzilla. So if you haven't seen part 1 and 2, be sure to check those out so you can learn more about Titanus Doug. And well, the evolution of Godzilla, obviously. I also want to give a quick special shout out to the Godzilla animators out there, particularly the ones that do stop motion and claymation, obviously, because you know how much work goes into this kind of stuff. I think a lot of you are responsible for, well, some of the best animations out there on YouTube, because it takes a lot of time and dedication to make that kind of thing, and I think the Godzilla franchise or fans definitely shows a lot of dedication to creating their own little fan films. So with that said, if you appreciate all the hard work and effort that goes into, well, the content that I create here, be sure to smash that like button as hard as a kaiju. Comment below what you think of the project, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. And be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of my daily short updates, as well as my weekly videos. I also do the occasional live stream where I'm usually working on these projects and/or stop motion animation. I'll probably start doing that kind of stuff more or less on the weekends. Now, a lot of you are probably curious as to what the next project will be, so here's, well, the announcement at the end of the video. The next project will be... drumroll please. The King of the Hollow Earth, King Kong himself. Definitely looking forward to this project. A lot of you have been, well, requesting King Kong a lot. I believe Shin Godzilla is pretty much next in line as far as monster goes, but after King Kong, we will see the return of Ignis the Dragon, also brought to you by, well, popular demand, which will be followed by a animation which I'll probably hold some polls on some of my community posts as well as live streams. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this adventure with Chubby King Dougie. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. Anyway, that's it from me. Till next time, take it easy.